It's such a pleasure to be here, and I love this conference. I think it's a great idea. It sort of echoes the origin of the archive where I work, which started in Switzerland about 80 years ago with a woman who had a vision. She wanted to give conferences, and she had studied Eastern philosophy, and she started to gather people from various disciplines, from science to religion to the arts, and she also collected images to these conferences. And she called the conferences Eranos, which means a shared feast, which means you bring your own poem or song or work or what you are interested in to this conference. And this is really what this conference is too. So it's so great. Yes. So I'll just say 2 words about the archives, and it's open to the public. You can come and visit it on 39th Street. And it has images and information about symbols. So you can come in and look up at design. People come in and look up artists. Lots of artists come, and people looking up their dreams. It's not so unusual. And sort of it bridges psychology, basically, and art, and all the other sciences between, wherever we sort of need, whatever we need to describe the symbol. Almost 2 years ago, we published a book on symbols, and you see it here, called The Book of Symbols. I just wanted to bring that greeting from the hand, the maker of, and here it is. And there are images, about 17,000 images from all over the world, and from all times. So you can come and research thematically a symbol across times and cultures. And these are the archetypal images, as Jung called them, and tradition going back to Plato. The images that we share, they're universal images as well, or eternal images, they were also called. And it all begins with imagination. I was love to see the 2 words, imagination and inspiration, because I think that's where everything starts. Hidden in imagination, the word is another word, and that's image. And I think it's a magic word. When we imagine something, it is the very beginning of something new taking form, and it arrives in the form of an image in the widest sense. It's a potential that begins to stir in us like a seed in the ground. And when an image moves us in some way, it has become a symbol. We see images all the time, as Deborah said. But when we sort of feel moved by something, it has become something else, and it really takes us in new places. And it's also called an archetypal image then. It is as if the image knows something that we don't. It comes like a guide or a messenger from somewhere else. There is always a sense of wonder accompanying imagination, beginning with, I wonder if I would do this, what would happen? And it's how every creative act begins, that we imagine something that didn't exist before. And as we follow our inspiration, that's how the world keeps changing, developing, and which we can see in the work of artists or any creative act, and also how we as human beings change and develop within ourselves. And we may ask, where do the symbols come from? And we don't know, as little as we know as where we come from, or where we go at night when we dream. And this great mystery is depicted as a circle, as seen in this empty circle, which is both empty and the source of everything, according to the Zen tradition. It is the formless world before creation. All circles are the same, down to the smallest dot, which we could imagine as the beginning of manifestation. When something begins to take form. The dot has many names. It's called the seed, a bud, or its pure potential. and it's also been called the simplest image of God. It's the smallest visible mark. It has position but no extension in space. And Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, called it the symbol of a mysterious creative center in nature. In India, it's called Bindu, and this is what you see here in this image. And you often see Indian people wearing it in the forehead, in the place of the third eye, which is the place of inner seeing or imagination, as if to remind ourselves of the potentials we all carry within us. And in a very practical way, it's the dot that appears when you put a compass on a paper and draw a circle. It's the very first step, even before you begin to draw. So it's the beginning of manifestation. And in ancient Greek, the mathematical philosophers called or saw geometry as a symbol of creation, because you find these geometrical forms all over in nature as well, as if they were born from nature. And nature means, the Latin word for nature, it has to do with born, being born. As you can see, they call the dot at the center also the seed, which is how we describe symbols, as seed, as potential, as I said. And with this circle, they can create all the other forms. And as the first beginning, the dot also suggests the light that enters the darkness. We can think of it as the light at creation, or the sun rising in the morning, or symbolically, the light of consciousness. When we are conscious, we see, we understand. So in Mayan cultures, in Egypt and in China, this glyph or symbol was the symbol of light. And later, in alchemy, it became the symbol of gold. And also in astrology, it's the symbol of the sun. All of these are related, have to do with a light that doesn't change. This is an image of Jyoti, an Indian Hindu word for, Sanskrit word for light. And this is the light that creates the transparency of consciousness. It's there, but we see through it. Or the crystallization or manifestation of matter, we can touch it. It's the sun that was really the birthplace of all creation. Every molecule came originally from the sun, and all the time the sun continues the ongoing creation as it gives life to everything on earth. This beautiful Islamic image expresses the same light, as if you can feel the light of the sun coming out and creating all these many shapes and forms of the world. It's called sunburst. Or we can imagine the same light at the center of ourselves, or as in this image of Buddha, which is our own creative center in the body, where the heart is the center. This image of cosmos shows the entire world as a center. Also, again, there's a little small center at the circle at the center, and surrounded by growing circles of rivers and mountains around that center. The word cosmos means order. And so when cosmos exists like this is in order, as opposed to the chaos before creation. And it's related to cosmetics. So when we put on cosmetics, we bring order to the world. And I was just talking to a participant before. There is also a goddess of cosmetics, Hathor from Egypt. And so she's part of this ordering in the world. She was also the goddess of joy and had lots of other aspects. So this circle at the center in the cosmos, as well as within ourselves, the center is the same, whether in the largest of the worlds in our own center. And it's expressed in an ancient Indian text, the Upanishad, in this way. Concealed in the heart of all beings lies the Atman, or the self, we would say, smaller than the smallest atom, greater than the greatest space. Here you see an image of the lotus flower, another circle, as a mandala. And you see on each little petal there is a Buddha sitting, and also at the center. And it's as if they are the seeds from the flower. All flowers are seen as symbols of creation because they produce these seeds that bring out the fruit. Mandala means a sacred circle, and Jung used this as a method of ordering. He himself did a lot of mandala. He painted mandalas, and he also had his patients. So when you feel chaotic, the circle centers us. Looking at the circle is a little bit like looking at a mirror. It's like looking at the unity and the wholeness of the divine order within ourselves. It reminds us of that original source and its centering. And I just want to briefly tell a story. We had to go through all the 17,000 images physically in the archive once. And when we started, there were so many more circles in ancient times, and we felt so much more calm. And as we came up to more modern times, they sort of were more distorted, or there were fewer circles, and we could feel the sort of how the art really affected us. So there was a sort of an experiment of the centering. Just as a reminder, creation doesn't only take place with the arrival of light, but also through movement. And here we see the Indian god Shiva dancing the world into creation. And he's surrounded by fire, a circle of fire. And then creation also takes place through sound and the sense of hearing. And here you see an Indian image of the mantra, the word Aum, which is the beginning of all sounds that sounded at the beginning of creation. And it's also called a seed sound in India. So this idea of seed keeps coming back, and you see how the circles vibrate out from the center. And each circle is exactly the same, including the tiniest dot at the center. And each circle symbolizes a sense of oneness, the formlessness before creation, and the source of creation, no matter what the size the circle is. So then the question comes up, how do we create two out of the one? How does two and then three come into being? How does the myriad of forms come into being? And the answer is the same, whether it's mythology, psychology, or geometry. It is through reflection. It simply needs another circle, identical to itself. And here you see how the ancient Greeks were able to demonstrate this through geometry by using a compass, and they drew a second circle by putting the point at the edge of the point of the compass at the edge of the circle. And then two circles appear. I just want to show that this idea of creating the world through geometry continued into Christianity. And here you see God forming the world with the help of a compass. But I want to go back to this image for a moment again. The Greeks called these two circles the world parents because this is the beginning of creating form. It's the mother and the father of all form, everything that's being created. Of all the opposites that we live in, all the conflicts and all the differences of light and dark, night and day, above and below, form and formless, chaos and order, these are some of the things I mentioned, heaven and earth, man and woman, matter and spirit, and the visible world and the invisible world. When we awake and we are asleep, all these opposites, rational and irrational, And also, it's all the conflicts that we feel within ourselves constantly. What other people want us to do, things we sort of battle within ourselves, and also the place of where we try to create something and we try to bring something into form. And we can also think of these two circles as the world of the consciousness and the world of the unconscious. And we think so much that we live in the conscious world, one of the circles, whereas really the other world has such an influence on us. And it's sort of interesting to think about that. And I would like to point out the form, the shape that is created. These two circles overlap. And where they overlap, they have a little bit of both. And this is where creativity comes out. It's also actually the shape of the female genitals, the actual birthplace. And as we will see, the Greeks called what came out, they call it the leaf or the child. And this is where symbols belong, because they come from both the conscious and the unconscious. And I don't know if you know the definition or the origin of the word symbol. It comes from a Greek word, symbolon, which is actually two Greek words. Sim means coming together, like symphony and sympathy. And balin means throwing. So it's things thrown together, almost a little violently, because they come from two such different places. A rational conscious mind and this totally unknown other that we all live with, the unconscious. And in this meeting, something happens, and this is where the image comes that sort of guide us, as I started to say, like a showing us the way. And if we pay attention, it also where dreams and poetry and song comes from, all creative things. And Jung called this the good angel, the angelo bono in Latin, which I think is a beautiful name for this place. So the symbol arrives as a calling, sometimes a whisper, sometimes it's an urge and a possession, we have to do something through a dream, or just an image that sort of pulls us of something we feel we must do or have to do or want to do. Just we're drawn to it. It comes as a song, as I said, or as poetry, which is really an image in words. So I would like to read a poem about this special place in between. It's written by the Mexican poet Octavio Paz, and it's called In Between. In between. Between what I see and what I say. Between what I say and what I keep silent. Between what I keep silent and what I dream. Between what I dream and what I forget. Poetry. I read it again. Between what I see and what I say. Between what I say and what I keep silent. Between what I keep silent and what I dream. Between what I dream and what I forget. Poetry. And poetry is really the only language we can describe images because they are so different. We think from the different side of brain when we think in images versus words, but poetry moves us into the image world. And again, I want to point out the line between the two dots at the center, which the Greeks called the stem. So you can see a plant or a tree start growing. And this is, you can see how the first form, the triangle, was created out of that. They just drew lines from the top of the two circles where they crossed through the middle and then down to the bottom. And you have the triangle. And that's the first true form, they called, or the child, or the leaf. So here's the plant and the natural world. And I just wanted to tell very briefly two dreams that I was told by two writers as we worked on the Book of Symbols for 12 years. And the first dream came at the very beginning. It was a writer who told me that she dreamt that she opened a book, and there were all these wonderful images of fruit inside the book. And as she looked at them, the images fell off the pages and came off and turned into real fruit that she could eat. And I think that's a beautiful description of how images and symbols nourish us. When we really see, or we feel in touch with those images, whatever it is that drives us to create, then it's become something like we can eat. And a very early Jungian analyst said that the body, the soul hungers for images as much as the body hungers for food. So. And the second dream was the dreamer dreamt at the very end of the book. He helped us with checking all the art history and all the facts right through. There were 800 images in this book, so it was a lot of checking. And he dreamt that he saw this image. No, actually. Oh, I forgot to show this beautiful image from Egypt, which really demonstrates the idea of the tree, the image of the tree here feeding the pharaoh. So here's the fruits that in the image that the pharaohs eat from the tree. And this is the image he dreamt of, which is by Georgia O'Keeffe, and it's the main image in the tree chapter. But he dreamt that it was moved to the beginning, to the very first page of the book. And it contained within it all the symbols in the book. So it's become a world tree, which is a symbol we have in all cultures, that we all living, the tree grows up in the sky and reaches up in the heavens. And the stem goes through the world we live in, and then the roots go down into the underworld. So it really connects the three domains of heaven, earth, and underworld. Here again we see an image of a tree. It's a very small tree in this case, but there's a little bird sitting in it. And it's an image from the weaving article in the book. And it also connects, the tree connects above and below. And the woman is the Mayan goddess Ixtel, who taught humankind to weave. And weaving is really this magical, simple crossing of weft and warp, this two sets of threads, which brings us back to the beginning of the two circles coming together. From these simple techniques, fabric is produced of such complexity that weaving became an image for the mystery of existence. And it's also the crossing in the sexual union, so the child is produced where the tissues are being woven in the mother's body. And cloth resemble language in many ways. The words form a syntax similar to how threads produce fabric. Text and textile share a common root, meaning to weave. And in an African Dogon myth, weaving and speech are the same, poetically combined to form their whole worldview. The mouth and the vocal cords produced both speech and cloth. And I think that's such a beautiful image of how we, in our talking, speaking, creating, also creates the world. As the German poet Rilke said, we have to give birth to our images. They're waiting to be born. Thank you.